All right, everyone. Welcome to this mayoral panel on climate and infrastructure. Thank you for joining. I'm Rhielyn Flores. I'm the Executive Director of Conservation Voters for Idaho. I am joined today by mayors from across the Intermountain West to discuss climate initiatives their towns are currently advancing and how federal investments can help communities rebuild America's infrastructure and respond to the impacts of a changing climate. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank fellow affiliates who helped organize today's panel: Conservation Colorado, CHISPA, Montana Conservation Voters, Nevada Conservation League, and Conservation Voters New Mexico. Today's conversation is part of our mayoral week of action. LCV state affiliates in 32 states are engaging their mayors to call for the passage of the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package through Congress that includes robust investments in climate, justice, and jobs. The investments we're calling for must cut U.S. emissions by 50% by 2030, put our nation fully on the path to 100% clean energy, powering our grid, cars, buses, and buildings by 2035, ensure that at least 40% of investments benefit low-income and communities of color who have borne the brunt of toxic and fossil fuel pollution and who are most vulnerable to climate impacts, and support the preservation and creation of high-quality, good-paying union jobs across the economy, from builders, roofers, pipe fitters, engineers, and more. We are thrilled to have with us today 6 mayors from cities across the Intermountain West. These mayors are leading on climate not only in their cities and states, but they're having a national impact as well. So let's get to know some of these local leaders. Joining us from Boise, Idaho, Mayor McLean was sworn in on January 7th, 2020, and immediately set to work towards her campaign promise of a 21st century Boise for everyone, powered by clean, renewable energy with shared prosperity across all neighborhoods and a commitment to transparency and openness in government. From Colorado, Mayor Jeni Arndt, after serving 3 years in the General Assembly, was elected mayor of Fort Collins in April of this year. Mayor Arndt served on the Commission of Disabilities as well as Child Safe before running for state representative in 2014. As a state representative, Arndt focused on water, agriculture, small business, and public education. From Nevada, Mayor Daniel Corona was elected mayor of West Wendover in 2016, becoming the youngest and first openly LGBTQ mayor in Nevada's history. Mayor Corona, a 4th-generation resident of the Wendover area and a lifelong outdoorsman, is a passionate advocate for protecting Nevada's public lands. From New Mexico, we've got Aztec Mayor Victor Snover, who was elected in 2018. Mayor Snover had a long career in the Army National Guard and serves on the board of the Economic Council Helping Others, which provides resources and education to individuals and families on their journey to improve their lives. Mayor Snover has long advocated for strong methane rules and against the false dichotomy of jobs versus public health and a clean environment. From Montana, Mayor John Engen, Missoula's 50th and longest serving mayor, has been a champion of conservation efforts, a partner in battling hunger and homelessness, and a proponent of thoughtful business development. Engen's accomplishments range from comprehensive planning efforts to ensure that Missoula is a compact, sustainable city, to restoring the city's once private water system to public ownership. And then from Arizona, we've got Mayor Kate Gallego, who is the 2nd elected female mayor in Phoenix and youngest big city mayor in the United States. Mayor Gallego has focused on 3 key policy areas during her time in office: diversifying the economy, strengthening infrastructure investments, and working to make Phoenix a leader in sustainability. Her record of proven results includes leading the campaign to pass Phoenix's citywide transportation plan through 2050. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this critical and timely conversation. Now let's turn the tables and hear from these local leaders. First off, Mayor McLean. Boise recently launched the Ambitious Climate Action Roadmap, which is a detailed climate action plan for Boise to become a carbon neutral by 2050. How would investments from the federal level help Boise implement and build upon this plan?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Rhielyn, and it's great to join all of my fellow mayors from the West to talk about the importance of climate investments and to call on Congress to pass the reconciliation bill so we can see these investments make real differences in our communities. You're right, in April, Boise passed its Climate Action Roadmap, which included goals for carbon neutrality by 2050 citywide, and importantly within our own city government by 2035. And we're also seeking to achieve 100% clean electricity citywide by that very same year, 2035. And I expect that we're on track to beat that. We would love to see this reconciliation pass because resilience investments, infrastructure investments are key to climate action and key to climate mitigation, but most importantly, key to climate innovation. And so here in Boise, as we are seeking ways to achieve our 100% clean energy goals and carbon neutrality goals, we're also seeking ways to build the economy by creating partnerships with businesses that'll use our community as a lab to create those tools we need to meet our goals. So some of the things that we're looking at are, of course, there's the simple things, doubling our tree canopy. So working with our residents to double the tree canopy throughout the community, particularly in those neighborhoods that haven't been invested in, that tend to be hotter, that tend to spend more money on energy bills because they're living in less efficient homes in these hotter neighborhoods. So looking at simple steps that we can take, like tree canopy, but also the big infrastructure steps. This fall, we'll have a water resilience bond on our ballot, where we're not only seeking to update the existing water treatment plant we have, but prepare for the growth that we're experiencing as a community, as one of the fastest growing communities in the country, and looking at ensuring that when we build for growth, we're also creating a system that will give us water that we can use to either drink or to supply manufacturing and clean tech jobs with. And that could be helped with investments here. We are electrifying our fleet. Just this morning, we made official the fact that we now have the largest, and will by the end of the year, the largest electric garbage truck fleet in the country. And we're partnering with Republic Services, our provider, but importantly, Peterbilt, the maker of these super cool garbage trucks that I got to drive this morning, and a lab, the national lab here is looking at how they can work with Peterbilt to learn from them and learn from Republic and learn from Boise to be able to bring to scale large vehicle electrification for cities around the country. So trying to do that here so that we can export the learnings and technology elsewhere to have an impact. And then finally, other transportation issues, from growing out a bus rapid transit system, and the investments that we could see in rail and transit from this bill and others will be really important and will be game changers for the community. So we're optimistic that this will move forward, that this will provide tools that will make real investments in good paying jobs that keep us healthy and build prosperity for our community moving forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your leadership. And as you mentioned, Boise is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. And I know Mayor Engen knows growth well. So next question is for you, Mayor Engen. How can rapidly growing communities like Missoula keep up with the pace and demand of new residents while staying true to sustainability and climate action goals?
Mayor, I think you're muted.
I think you're muted.
And you would think I would learn by this time. And
it always happens to one person, at least one person.
And it's almost always me. Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you today and my colleagues from around the West. I have not had the good fortune of driving a garbage truck, but I may have to make a road trip to Boise to see if something like that could happen. I'd be grateful for the chance. Missoula, like many communities around the West, are growing at what feels like an unprecedented pace, and we've either been discovered or rediscovered in a new way. And the pandemic has had certainly a catalytic effect there. But what we continue to do is what we've done for many years now. It's really interesting from the perspective of somebody who's been in this job for a while. In 2006, I attended my first U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Summit in Anchorage. And in 2006, mayors didn't talk about climate change, and they didn't talk about global warming because it was the third rail at that point. And only a few of the brave were willing to kind of lean in at that point. And fortunately, I had a predecessor in office and a community that was supportive, believed in science, and recognized the critical juncture that we found ourselves in 2006. And now lo, these many years later, the juncture is even more critical. And we have high hopes for the reconciliation and investment in infrastructure to keep us going to meet some of our goals. Fundamentally for us, planning has been a critical component of our climate action. It turns out you don't know where you're going unless you make a plan for where you're heading. And I am largely a convert to planning. And when I served on the Missoula City Council, we had lots of plans sitting on the shelf that collected dust, and we really changed our philosophy around community and resident engagement in our planning processes. And so our fundamental planning documents today reflect community values and interests, and they are implementable, and we are held accountable to those. So as we talk about growth and development, so much of it for us is about being in a place that is compact, that takes advantage of existing infrastructure, and that recognizes equity in everything we do. And so if you look at our transportation plan, for example, it is inextricable from our land use planning. And there was a time in the state of Montana where you couldn't talk about land use and transportation in the same sentence because the Department of Highways would reject your request for funds to create the plan. Today, we look at transportation as a critical component, not only of equity, but also of climate change. And the fewer folks we have in single occupancy vehicles and the more access that folks have to alternative modes of transportation makes a huge difference. A few years ago, we pulled the fare boxes out of our buses. We used to spend about $300,000 a year on advertising, trying to get folks to ride the bus. Instead, we pulled the fare boxes out, and we learned that was a barrier. And so now ridership doubled, and we're serving more than 1 million folks a year, some of whom rely on that public transportation system as their only means to get around. We think about our building codes, we think about residential density, we think about our commercial development all holistically. We link land use, transportation, infrastructure together. And in doing so, we create efficiencies that also enhance quality of life and enhance that quality of life for everyone. Finally, I just need to note that that sometimes you just have to take really significant risks in order to preserve and protect your community. And in our case, we went toe to toe in a court of law to acquire our water system from at that time Carlisle Infrastructure Partners, an investment fund whose directors and whose investors had no idea where Missoula, Montana was. In doing so, we secured that system that at that time leaked 50% of the water it pumped. We're making headway there, and we're making headway quickly because our motives are much different. We live in a state now where a community to the north of us is rationing water, and we're not going to be in that position because of public expectation and our ownership. And finally, one of the things I've learned over the years is that sometimes we lead by following. And I happen to serve a community that is very not only interested and engaged, but has high expectations of elected officials to do something about this. And so every day we're considering climate as a piece of the puzzle as we march forward through budgeting, planning, infrastructure investment, and more.
Well, thank you, Mayor Engen. It's good to see how far we've come since 2006 and how important local leaders are like yourself in advancing climate action. Speaking of some of the issues of growing cities, another one of them is air quality. And that brings us to our next question, which is Fort Collins Mayor Jeni Arndt. Mayor Arndt, Colorado has faced some of its worst air quality problems this summer. How can cities, states, and Congress work together to address air quality problems across your state and the region?
Well, thank you. And thank you to all the mayors for being here. I think it follows on some of the discussion that we've already had. We have had the two largest wildfires in Colorado history were last summer. One was right out my back door. It was dark as night. I think in the West, we all know what that looks like. 2 weekends ago, I think the Front Range had the worst air quality in the entire world. So I went to a meeting and I felt like I was in Beijing. And I thought, never have I seen this in my bed. I'm a hometown girl, and we grew up under the brown cloud. We thought we got rid of it when we banned wood-fired, things in town, and we went to cleaner, we get away from lead, do these things. We're in a whole new world now, as we all know. So I think a lot about systems approaches and regionalism, right? And how is that connected to air quality? Well, I said on the Regional Transportation Commission, the single biggest variable on the quality of air on the Front Range, where we have this inversion. So we have a special ozone problem as well. And when it comes here, it stays here. So the single biggest variable when you run all those models is proximity to work. So then you get into affordable housing, right? So teachers and people who work for the fire department need to live where they work, right? So we need to reduce commuting time. So what do we need? So then that gets into transit. Obviously, that's an obvious one. It gets into, just as the other mayor said, building codes, land use codes. These things are all connected. And then for us, what's super important, as it is for every Western state, is water and water quality and water quantity, right? Our river, the Poudre River, is running black. Right, we've had unusual monsoon rains this year, of course, after the fires come the floods, and that river is absolutely black. So how do we build in redundancy, resiliency? And it's all connected to air quality. In addition to these things, I think about the interconnectedness and, collaboration for real, right? So we have a good neighbor policy between our state and federal forest services here. I didn't think that was very unusual. Evidently, I don't know if it was the first in the country, but anyway, it's something that we need to work on. Fires, obviously, don't know what kind of land they're on, municipal, private, right? So we all need to come together. We need to emphasize forest health, right? We need to get up there and get thinning. We need to invest in those forests so that they don't burn. That impacts our air quality. We are transitioning as fast as we can to the clean energy economy here. Fort Collins had the toughest climate action plan in the country, I think in 7-0 on council, and I was at the state then, and my colleagues were laughing at me and they said, how are you going to do that? How are you going to afford that? And I called home to my mayor and I said, how are we going to afford that? And he said, we can't afford not to. So in the late 60s, we buried all our power lines here when that guy's dad was mayor. Again, expensive and very forward thinking, because our power doesn't go down. We've already buried them, right? We also had the foresight to bury some dark fiber. So now we have a public broadband utility and we're using that space that our foreparents thought about. I'm just trying to be as smart and as connected, interconnected, systematically thinking as our foreparents were in guiding us into this really highly variable future. And air quality is, you can see all the issues that wrap around it. And, we're all hands on deck and all issues are on the table.
Thank you, Mayor Arndt. We also know another way cities can address air quality problems is by making it easier for residents to drive clean powered vehicles. Our next question is for Mayor Gallego, who has been leading infrastructure planning for the city of Phoenix. Mayor Gallego, what would federal investments like the Build Back Better plan mean for your community?
Thank you so much. An incredibly important question. And I'm glad to be here with all of you. When Mayor Engen was in Anchorage fighting climate change in 2006, I was pleased to serve as the president of the Arizona League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. And I understand there are several people who are part of this conversation who have been in leadership roles at state leagues since then. So thank you all for your service and for making sure that we have a stronger planet to leave behind. Just by background, I have an undergrad environmental degree and then got an MBA and worked in economic development. And one of my passions in public service is helping businesses become more sustainable. The Phoenix region is now sometimes called the Electric Valley because we are getting such a great concentration of electric vehicle companies, whether it be companies that are building advanced electric trucks, battery technology, or charging stations. And we know we have to keep working with them to make sure we have a stronger electric grid. The Biden Build Back Better agenda will help with that. It will help with $7.5 billion of investment in the EV area. That means tens of millions of dollars in my community. It'll really help us build out the infrastructure. We know that one of the barriers to adoption is people have what we refer to as range anxiety. Am I going to be able to get where I'm going without running out of the charge? And so the more we can have a robust charging infrastructure, including along our interstate system, the more people will be excited about adopting electric vehicles. So I'm very excited about that huge national investment in EV charging infrastructure. I think when our US government has made transformative coast-to-coast investments in infrastructure, it has helped us be leaders in innovation, and I'm excited about what this will do when we get it to the finish line. We also hope to be able to do certain districts in our community where we have particular investments in advanced vehicle innovation. I think Mayor McLean and the Boise eco districts are very cool. And we like a similar idea in Phoenix with EVs being a particular focus and vehicle innovation. I also really appreciate the support for electric school buses. We want our kids to be breathing clean air and have a clean ride to school. And I hope more districts will have the chance to electrify their fleet with the support from the federal government in partnership with local governments. I think that's something that will make a difference in every single community, and more dollars in the classroom as well, which as a parent is exciting to me. And perhaps some of those kids who ride to school in an electric bus will be inspired to be the engineers of the future and keep America leading in terms of these types of technologies. So I'm very excited about that and really trying to push to make sure EVs stay at the top of the priority list as the infrastructure package moves forward. I have the pleasure of co-chairing Climate Mayors, which is a bipartisan group of over 400 US mayors that has been advocating for policies that move us forward on climate change, and including investing in reducing transportation emissions, our top sector in the US. And we have several very active members of Climate Mayors who are here with us today. So thank you all for your partnership. Climate Mayors has been putting forward a bipartisan voice for mayors to say climate change has to be at the forefront of the infrastructure package. I'm also part of Cities Race to Zero, which is a challenge going into the United Nations climate talks coming up this fall. And we're asking cities to sign up and sign that pledge to go towards zero. And again, many of the cities who are participating today are already part of that. If you're not, let me know and we can tell you more about it. But we do hope that mayors can be an important voice in clean tech, American leadership, and reducing our transportation emissions.
Thank you, Mayor Gallego. I always love to hear from folks who are connected to the conservation voter movement and how they found themselves in leadership positions like yourselves, and how you're leveraging those opportunities to make a big impact. And, today we've also heard a lot about how the Build Back Better plan will help benefit the larger communities, but we also know that our small rural towns across the West are also experiencing the devastating impacts of climate. So my next question is for Mayor Corona. Mayor Corona, how do small, more rural towns like West Wendover experience the climate crisis, and how can they work to respond to the climate crisis?
That's a very timely question, as overnight in West Wendover, we saw our temperatures. Our high yesterday was 104. Our high today is 64. So that's a decrease in 40 degrees overnight. And so those drastic changes in temperature are happening more frequently. This year, we hit 100 degrees earlier than we ever have before in the first week of June. And that's, I think, 2 days earlier than we hit it last year, which was at that time the earliest. So we're seeing, we're getting hotter a lot quicker. And then we're having drastic changes in temperature throughout the summer and fall. And so it's having an impact. We also our sky is completely gray right now because of smoke from the wildfires in California and Utah. So, you know, it's having a major impact on us. And I think in some ways, climate change has an outsized impact on smaller communities, especially when you look at the areas where wildfires are happening. The communities that are unfortunately being burned to the ground are smaller rural communities. And so that's something that we face and have to live with that fear, unfortunately. But we can do things to help change that. Mayor McLean touched on expanding Boise's tree canopy. That's something that every community of every size can do, is try to expand their canopy. We can also invest in clean energy. I'm sitting in West Wendover City Hall, and it's the first building in West Wendover that's powered completely by solar. We have 340 days of sun every year in West Wendover. So we need to do more to invest in more solar. That means working with solar companies to attract them to our community to make West Wendover a major producer of solar energy. And that's something we're working on right now. We can also invest in electric vehicle charging stations. West Wendover doesn't have very many electric vehicles, but we have 12 electric vehicle charging stations right now, and there are plans to add more. We're a tourism-based economy. We are just an hour and a half drive from Salt Lake City, so we get a lot of folks coming over for the weekend to gamble and enjoy the Nevada things that they can do here. And so investing in that clean tech so that when they're coming out here, when they're driving their electric vehicles, they're able to charge up here. And when folks are traveling through on their way to California or to the eastern side of the country on I-80, they can stop off in West Wendover and charge their vehicles. And then as more folks start buying electric vehicles in the community, that infrastructure is already there. So, I mean, there are those things that we can do and that we can continue to do. And it's so important that we do them.
Thank you, Mayor Corona. Another small town in the West is Aztec, New Mexico. Mayor Snover, although Aztec is an oil and gas community, you have been an outspoken advocate for new rules regulating methane waste and leaks. This is an important way to address climate pollution while generating revenues for the state. In this time of energy transition, in what ways do you think that diversifying the economy with renewable energy and climate infrastructure investments could benefit Aztec and the region?
Well, first, I want to thank all of the other mayors and the League of Conservation Voters for inviting me to this. I have friends. Well, I happen to kind of met Mayor Corona as we're both members of Western Leaders Network based out of Durango, Colorado. So I've met him. I don't know anybody from West Wendover except for the mayor, but I have friends, colleagues from my 20-something years serving in the military up till now in all of the different places. I went to high school with a good friend that lives in Boise now. But at any rate, I appreciate the opportunity and thanks for inviting me. I just kind of want to talk about, in maybe ignorance is bliss. I'm not from the region originally. And I've learned kind of, drinking from a fire hose about some of the competing interests with the oil and gas industry. I do come from, the East Coast, West Virginia, extractive industry, coal mines, things like that. And unfortunately, it's playing out here. The same issues we have here where it's instead of a lot of research-based and data-based solutions, we are fear-mongering and scaring people into, making them believe that we're just trying to kill their job and kill their industry. Folks around here just want to feed their families. They want, regardless of your political stripes, they want the same things that we all want. We want safe schools. We want to be able to pay our bills and put our kids, send our kids to college and have a nice house to live in to come home every night and not have to worry about where our next meal is going to come from. And I understand where they're coming from. I've been there. But the things that I think our messaging and our communication could improve as we start to talk about pushing some of these initiatives like the Build Back Better plan, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, and how it can benefit a place like Aztec, New Mexico. We're a very small rural-ish sort of town of about 6,800 folks. And we are very oil and gas dependent here, as you know, it's over 30% of the state's revenue for our tax revenues. So I'm not talking about some of the big things that some of these other mayors are able to do. We're talking about, trying to get seed money from the state to do an outdoor recreation business accelerator. We're doing business development in some underused parts connecting our national park or our national monument, Aztec ruins, to our downtown to pull tourists in there to visit Aztec ruins and pull them into our downtown. We're trying to block off the major corridor for all the oil and gas trucks and make it more tourist friendly. And I think the pandemic has just started to accelerate some of these things because, believe it or not, a place like Aztec, New Mexico, with no interstates within 3 hours, is is a hot real estate market. Folks are gravitating towards these places because they're able to work remotely, and we have amenities of a small to mid-sized town and city, and we have all of the great places surrounding us, like where y'all are from, including where you all are from. But we also have to acknowledge the major role that oil and gas has played and will continue to play in New Mexico for some time, while also trying to, transition to the new energy economy, which, and I want to salute our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, for being forward thinking in a tough place to do that sort of thing with the dominance that we've had of oil and gas for so long. She's exploring new options, carbon capture. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. She's trying to, with the Energy Transition Act that she passed or was able to get passed in her first legislative session as governor, to help take care of the displaced workers of when our power plant is getting ready to close. She's speaking truth to the folks, whether we want to hear it or not, that it's time to transition away from this industry and to find ways through renewable replacements. And one of the things that I think is understated is, as we work with our federal delegation, Senator Heinrich, Senator Hahn, and Congresswoman Fernandez, that we, to cap these orphaned wells and to make our methane rules much more stringent than they are now. The cottage industry, for lack of a better phrase, that those industries that will grow from this, the cleanup, industry of capping these wells, the ability to, improve our ability to find and mitigate methane leaks. I mean, when we did a thing at Chaco a couple of summers ago or springs ago, and they have, kind of like an infrared sort of camera. I mean, it's fairly common technology, but the applications are endless for a place that is covered in oil fields like, San Juan County, New Mexico. And just kind of referring to some of my notes here, even kind of speaking of the cleanup, based on recent economic analysis, there's estimates of $8 billion plus that could be injected into the New Mexico economy. $500 million or more could be projected to be injected into the San Juan County economy. So what that means to me as a mayor, who's always kind of shaking their cup for money from the state or the feds, is that we get that GRT money directly into San Juan County. We get our share of that. And then that allows me and my fellow commissioners and our city managers and budget folks to look at ways to invest that money to, kind of seed, the outdoor rec industry, the renewable energy industry, the mitigation industry. And now that we've legalized recreational cannabis, that industry as well, to give them a place to get started and know that there's quality, hardworking folks that are, and give folks another option. San Juan College does a great job with their energy program, and now that's started to trickle down to our high schools. Just this year, we have an energy program class, and it's giving young people an option in some hope that they're not going to have to go and work on a well pad somewhere. You know, they have things that they can do that are sustainable and that are going to last when they're older, like me, in their 50s, and they're going to be able to feed their family and not worry about, you know, having to move to Texas or the southeast part of the state just to find work and hope that they can kind of make it, you know, a little bit longer till they get their kids through college. So again, I appreciate the invite, and I think it's important that we all rally behind this Build Back Better plan and the budget reconciliation that we're getting ready to encounter soon, and move forward with an eye on the future, doing all the great things that these other mayors have talked about. So thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Snover. You know, as you mentioned, we're in this moment, we have an incredible opportunity to advance a once in a generation investment into your local communities to help advance not only what your communities need, but also to help advance bold climate action, which we all know is much needed. You know, we've got some questions that were submitted from audience members, so I would love to open those up to the panel now. And, you know, Mayor Snover, you mentioned how important it is for municipal leaders to speak out now about the Build Back Better plan. So I would love to hear from any of the mayors on today's panel about how you see yourselves working with our congressional representatives, and how can you drive support for federal climate action as a mayor? Who would like to take that question?
I will say one of the best ways, and you know, I think in Nevada we're very lucky in that we you know, have a good relationship with our congressional delegation, the entire delegation, and so just keeping those lines of communication open is so incredibly important. You know, West Wendover is represented by the one Republican that represents Nevada in Congress. And so we don't always see eye to eye. He has different thoughts on climate change than we have, but we have found common ground on many issues, and we can still make sure that these issues are getting addressed at a congressional level. We're lucky that he does believe that climate change is real, unlike some of his colleagues, but you know, we still have some differences in opinion on the ways to address that. So just making sure that we continue to keep those lines of communication going is so important.
In Phoenix, we are trying to work with our congressional delegation to make sure they know what all the possibilities are and make sure they stay updated, for example, on the growing number of climate-focused sustainable businesses that are in our community and what it would mean economically for us. We work very closely with our federal delegation on some of the issues around fire. We've also had a very difficult fire-related year. And then lately, I would say on water and preparing for some of the issues along the Colorado River, we are talking to our delegation really on a weekly basis. I am lucky in that a lot of our delegation has close ties to the city of Phoenix and local government. So I share a last name with my congressman. My predecessor as mayor is also serving in Congress right now, Greg Stanton, who is on the Transportation Committee and has been a great partner on sustainable transportation for me. I'm trying to engage our business community as well. So yesterday I did a great event with our Arizona Technology Council about electric vehicles and again, what it can mean for us if we make a bold federal investment there. Also talking about on the equity side, how do we make sure these technologies are available to more and more of our community? If we're going to make a big dent in greenhouse gas emissions, broad adoption really matters. And so trying to paint a vision about what is possible and that we are blessed to be here at this moment in time where we can really make a transformational investment that we will be proud to tell the next generation we were here when this happened and that we showed we get the importance of conservation and protecting our planet.
I thought I'd jump in here too. I wanted also just to thank our two Republican senators, Senator Crapo and Senator Risch, for their support of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And it was really important that we see bipartisanship, of course, but we needed their votes. And I've said to them, in addition to sending my thanks, that climate investments are investments, full stop, right? So we need to do whatever we can together through this reconciliation process to make sure that investments can be made here, not just in Boise, but in the state, because so goes the state, so goes our city, so goes our city, so goes the state. We're also working with our regional transportation authority and Congressman Simpson, and thanks to his help, we're able to secure some community investments that will help us build out some 20-year wishes with regard to bus rapid transit along a really important corridor, and working with the mayors throughout this region to align some of our infrastructure investments, ARPA dollars, and hopefully our plan is for, to do some grants together as a region. So working with the delegation, but importantly, working with local government across the region. And then I also wanted to flag, because Mayor Gallego brought it up, it's really important, the innovation piece. I'll be visiting soon the National Lab to talk about potential partnerships that we can have with them to meet our shared goals of research, innovation, technology when it comes to clean energy and storage in the long run. And so, of course, we'll look to the delegation to be helpful in that, and really appreciate their support so far as we've tried to build a climate economy.
I'm just gonna dash out because I have to run, but quickly, just our governor was our congressman, our senator was our governor, who was the mayor of Denver. I'm the fourth largest city. The second largest city was our other congressman. I mean, we just kind of, it's very nice. Sounds kind of old school, but we know each other. We work well together. It's a nonpartisan issue. And I think that's important to keep talking about. Our kids and our grandkids' future should be nonpartisan. And so thank you for having me. It's nice to meet all you hardworking mayors out there. And while we were on the phone, I joined the mayor's climate thing. So count me in on that. I already signed up and I'm ready to go. So have a great day and thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Mayor Arndt. And I always love a good, successful recruitment. Mayor Engen, were you trying to provide a quick answer to the question at hand of how can municipal leaders work with federal and congressional representatives to advance federal climate action?
I was. So I often describe Missoula as a city near Montana. We're a bit of a blue dot in a state that's largely red, but fortunately, infrastructure, I think, as a concept has transcended partisan lines, and there's something here for everyone. And I think our ability to rely on consistent leadership from our senior Senator Tester, who is a reasonable and practical public servant, along with the rest of the delegation. We've had good conversations, and I think there is general recognition that there are winners in all of these communities, and rural Montana benefits from urban Montana doing well, and vice versa. And we don't need this. I think the term of art earlier was false dichotomy, and so these conversations are encouraging, and will continue. And frankly, if we have some luck here, we might find some other things to agree on, and maybe get this nation moving in the direction it needs to move. This federal investment is so critical. That leadership is so critical. And there are lots of us on the ground who are ready to deploy those resources in ways that will have a lasting and meaningful impact for the residents we serve. And these are residents we all serve.
Thank you, Mayor Engen, and thanks to many of you today who have led in big ways for many years and who are helping spread the message on how critical this large investment is in the Build Back Better plan. We know local leaders and all of the attendees are helping us to raise that message that from environmental justice and labor leaders, the private sector, the mayors that you heard from today, and elected officials at all levels of government, and folks in every state and district across the country strongly support investments in clean energy jobs and infrastructure. So a big thank you to everyone who joined us for today's panel. You know, we're counting on Congress to enact the full Build Back Better agenda into law as swiftly as possible. Inaction on climate is not an option, and we're out of time. We know we need congressional action on clean energy, justice, and jobs now. So thank you again to everyone, to all of the mayors who joined us today. And we look forward to seeing how our collective energy can advance bold climate investments here in the near future.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.